Before we start the video, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you. And now, let's go. Story 1. I'm not sure where to start, so I'll just dive in. I need to tell anyone, because I'm losing my grip. My phone is texting me, not someone else, not a spam bot. My own phone is sending me messages at 3 a.m., and I don't know how to make it stop. I'm terrified to even touch it anymore, but I can't just throw it away. I tried that. It didn't work. A month ago, I got a new phone. Nothing fancy, just a budget model I picked up because my old one's battery was shot. I transferred everything over, same number, same apps, no big deal. The first few days were fine. Then the text started. Every night, 3 a.m. on the dot, my phone buzzes. The screen lights up, and there's a new message. From my own number. The first one was simple. You forgot. I stared at it, bleary-eyed, thinking it was a glitch. I hadn't sent myself anything. I checked my sent messages. Nothing. I deleted it, figuring it was some weird carrier error. The next night, same time, another text. You forgot again. My stomach twisted. I hadn't forgotten anything. No appointments, no birthdays, nothing. I Googled it. Found some tech forums saying it could be a SIM card issue or a hacked account. I changed my passwords, reset the phone, even called my carrier. They said everything looked normal. By the third night, I was on edge. I turned off my phone before bed, left it in the kitchen. At 3 a.m., I woke up to the buzz. My phone was on my nightstand, screen glowing, showing a new text. Why are you ignoring me? I froze. I hadn't touched the phone. I left it downstairs. I yanked the battery out and stuffed it in a drawer. The next night, it was back on my nightstand. Another text. You can't hide. I know how this sounds. Like I'm losing it. I thought so too. I took it to a repair shop, some hole-in-the-wall place with a guy who looked like he'd seen every tech problem under the sun. He ran diagnostics, said there was nothing wrong. No malware, no weird apps, nothing. He laughed it off, said maybe I was sleepwalking and texting myself. I wasn't laughing. The messages started getting specific. You left the door unlocked last night. I live alone. I check my locks religiously. But I went to the front door, and the latch was undone. I installed a deadbolt the next day. Then came, you shouldn't have eaten that. I'd had leftovers, chicken that was maybe a day past its prime. I got sick that night, puking for hours. I started wondering if someone was watching me, hacking my phone's camera or mic. I taped over the lenses, disabled every permission. The texts kept coming. Last week it got worse. I woke up to look behind you. I was alone in my apartment, lights off, heart hammering. I grabbed a kitchen knife and checked every corner, every closet. Nothing. But I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next message was a photo. It was me, sleeping, taken from above my bed. My phone was on my nightstand in the picture, screen dark. I screamed, dropped it, and ran to a friend's place. I told her everything. She said I was stressed, maybe hallucinating. She offered to keep my phone for a night. I agreed, left it with her, and crashed on her couch. At 3 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was in my hand. I don't know how. The message read, "She doesn't believe you." My friend was asleep in the next room. I didn't wake her. I couldn't. I just sat there, staring at the screen, feeling like something was breathing down my neck. I tried everything. I smashed the phone with a hammer, threw the pieces in a dumpster across town. The next night, it was back on my nightstand, screen cracked but working. The message said, "You're making me angry." I took it to a priest, thinking maybe this was beyond tech. He blessed it, said a prayer. That night, that won't help. The messages are getting longer now. Last night's was a paragraph. You forgot what you did. You forgot who you hurt. I'm here to remind you. I'm always here. I'm in your hand right now. I'm in your eyes. I'm in your head. You can't run from what you are. I don't know what it means. I haven't hurt anyone. I'm just a normal guy, 27, working a desk job. No enemies, no dark secrets. At least I don't think I do. I'm typing this on my laptop because I can't stand touching the phone anymore. But it's sitting next to me, screen off, waiting. I know it'll buzz at 3 a.m. It always does. I've stopped sleeping through the night. I'm afraid to close my eyes, afraid of what I'll see when I wake up. I keep thinking about that photo, the angle, the way my face looks so peaceful while something watched me. Last night, I stayed awake. I sat there staring at the screen, daring it to light up. At 3 a.m., it did. No buzz, just a glow, like it was already expecting me. There was no new message, just 3 dots. Typing, typing, typing. They never stopped. At 3:09, the phone vibrated once. The screen stayed black. No message. I picked it up. It felt warm, too warm, like it had been pressed against someone's skin. Then this morning, I checked my photo gallery. There was a new image. It's me again, still asleep. But this time, I'm not alone. There's something behind me in the photo. In the dark. Just barely visible, but it's there. Watching. Closer than it should be. Too close. Its face looks familiar. I don't think this is about the phone anymore. I think I knew this thing once. Or maybe I still do. And if it's reading this, if it's in my phone, in my house, in my head, I hope it sees this last part. I remember. Story 2. Sorry, I didn't know where else to turn for help. My daughter hasn't been the same since the car accident last month. She used to be your typical, happy-go-lucky kindergartner. As long as you didn't run out of snacks, she didn't run out of joy. Sure, she'd get cranky if she went to bed late or had too much time on her tablet. Mostly, she was a little ray of sunshine bouncing around the house, humming tone-deaf songs with the confidence only a small child could muster. But not since the accident. It wasn't really that serious. Just a simple right turn. A horn. Glass. Airbag. My nose felt like it shattered. Honestly, that was the worst of it for me. Sophia was in the back seat, asleep in her booster. She barely stirred. The ambulance came, and the medic took a look at us both. They said since Sophia was a minor, they had to take her in for observation. At the hospital, they had me wait out in the waiting room while they checked her over and let me know it would be best if they kept her overnight. I watched as they wheeled her off to another room, her sweet little hand poking out from the blankets. I never should have let her out of my sight. When I picked her up the next morning, she was quiet and withdrawn but happy to see me. She wrapped her little arms and legs around me, almost as if clinging on for dear life. "It's okay, sweetie," I soothed as I twisted back and forth in our embrace. "So, do I just go home? Do I need to sign her out?" I asked a passing nurse, fumbling through the procedure. She just gave a cold stare for daring to interrupt her. "You can go home," she said finally, eyeing me as though I were an insect. I carried Sophia out of the hospital and got on the bus to go home. The nurse, with her cold blue eyes, created a feeling of unease and soured the rest of the day. Sophia was a little quiet when we got home and didn't have much of an appetite. Still, I left out some carrot sticks and Teddy Grahams for her to nibble on if she was up for it. I had to get a car, and maybe that's why I didn't notice her strange behavior at first. My insurance didn't cover very much of the vehicle replacement. In fact, it barely covered any. I guess that's what happens when you can only afford the bare minimum. I scoured online, called dealerships, and finally when I'd found a car, I scheduled an appointment to go in and test drive it. I texted my ex-husband to pick Sophia up. It was his custody weekend, and as usual, he wasn't answering his texts, and he wasn't here to get her. Sophia was so good at the dealership. She sat quietly through the paperwork and didn't fuss when the credit check took nearly 45 minutes. Normally, she'd be melting down, screaming for my phone and complaining about how hungry she was. But she must have understood the importance of getting this car for us. I told the salesman I need a car seat for Sophia before I could drive it. He looked confused for a moment. It was true that Sophia was just about on the threshold of no longer needing it, but safety is important to me, I said in earnest. He gave his salesman smile and had one of his assistants purchase a booster seat for Sophia so we could drive the car home. It wasn't pink like she wanted, but she could put stickers on it later if she chose. I strapped her in and sat in the driver's seat. The accident had left me nervous. I looked in the rearview mirror at Sophia, then I took a deep breath and exhaled. I twisted the key and started the car. The ride home was quiet. Sophia must have been feeling my fear of driving again. I quickly spoke up. "Would you like some music, honey?" I said, forcing a smile. I had to be brave for her. Fear can rub off on your children, make them grow up to be dysfunctional. "I like this car better," she stated. Like it was a fact, not a feeling. "Yeah, that's great. Me too. What do you like about it?" I asked cheerily. But that was all she had to say the rest of the ride. When we got in, I fixed her a sandwich, cut into triangles the way she likes it. "You were so good today, sweetie," I purred as I stroked her cheek. "Would you like some Oreos with your sandwich?" Finally, a smile. She nodded. Relieved, I got her 4 little cookies and put them on the plate next to her sandwich. Okay, try to eat at least some of your sandwich first. I kissed her on the head and walked over to my room out of sight and earshot. I called my ex-husband again and shut the door before leaving him a message on his answering machine. Look, Connor, today was your custody day. If you want to be a father, act like one. It's fine if you don't want to see me, but Sophia doesn't deserve to be disappointed by you every time. I tossed my phone down on the bed in disgust. Where did I go wrong with him? We used to be happily married. He was an involved father while we together. Now he won't even speak to me. Or her. I guess divorce brings out the worst in people. I took a breath and walked back out to the kitchen area where Sophia was sitting. She'd lined her Oreos and Teddy Grahams into a perfect, straight line across the table. Now, the carrot sticks, one by one, exactly spaced. Hey, let's eat our food instead of playing with it. Okay. I went over and started to pick up an Oreo. Or I'm going to eat this. Don't, she said sharply, her glare bearing into me. Her sweet eyes now cold and sharp. Stunned, I didn't even know what to say. It wasn't the normal childish way of yelling at a parent to stop. This was filled with cold, simmering rage. A chill went down my spine. Okay, sweetie, I said, putting the Oreo back down. I was just playing. I wouldn't really eat your cookie. Her only answer was a scowl as she fixed the Oreo back into the line, as though she were more upset about the fact that I disturbed her meticulous order more than the fact that I was going to eat it. She still hadn't really eaten anything. I would call the doctor in the morning. A wave of guilt washed over me. Maybe the car accident was more traumatizing for her than I realized. We watched her favorite movie together before bed. She just stared at the screen. Normally she laughed and quoted the movie while the characters said their lines and sang along with their songs. Not tonight, though. Tonight was just eerie silence as she stared blankly at the TV. I tucked her into bed and gave her a kiss on the forehead. Ooh, you're cold, I said as I put an extra blanket on her and gave her an Eskimo kiss. I'll just have to snuggle you up, warm as a bug. She just stared at me, unblinking. Unsettled, I sat up on her bedside. Hey, honey, I know you had a long day, and it must have been really scary to be in that little accident. Do you want to talk about it? She continued to stare for a moment. Daddy can't stand the sight of you. The level of vitriol made my stomach turn as I involuntarily jerked back. What? Was all I could stammer out. You ruined everything, she hissed at me, her eyes pure hatred. Unable to gain my composure, I stammered that those words weren't very nice before standing up. Good night, Mommy, she said sweetly, my little girl again, holding her hands out for a hug. I gave her a hesitant hug and a kiss on the cheek. Sweet dreams, cupcake. I want us to practice our kind words. Okay. I tucked the blankets up to her chin and left her to dreamland. I turned the thermostat up a couple degrees for Sophia. Connor must have been talking to her. Where else would she get that anger? Those accusations? I picked up my phone and saw that I finally got a text back from him. Stop contacting me. That was it. I didn't get any sleep that night. The next morning, she was sitting on her bed staring at the wall. Silently, I called up her pediatrician. She wasn't listed as a patient anymore. She had been removed from the practice. Who removed her? I demanded. It looks like it was at the request of the father. I'm sorry. We can do a walk-in if you like, the electronic distorted voice tried reassuringly. Why would Connor remove her? He was so fucking spiteful. Quelling my anger, I got Sophia in the car, buckled her into her booster seat, and nervously sat in the driver's seat. I could feel the cold terror as I sat there. This car just made me feel claustrophobic, and the seatbelt trapped me into it. I looked into the rear view mirror at Sophia. Deep breath. Exhale. Turn the key and drive. I got her to the doctor's office and walked up to the receptionist. Hi. We used to be a patient here. We still are, I said almost frantically. The receptionist just smiled, that sweet smile young nurses do. Okay. No problem. We can get you back in the system. Great. Sophia's been quiet and acting a little off. We had an accident the other night. Nothing serious, but she had to stay for observation. For good measure. But, she's not eating or playing really, I said, starting to ramble. All right, we'll check her out. Her name? The receptionist said sweetly. Sophia Brown, I said. I was going to kill Connor later. Why would he do this to her? It was one thing to take me off his insurance, but removing Sophia from the doctors? I hated him with every fiber of my being in that moment. Birth date. The receptionist frowned, snapping me out my train of though. I rattled off her birth date and address, the receptionist getting more uneasy as I did. Is she here? She asked, looking concerned. Yes, she's right. I looked over. She was gone. Sophia? I looked frantically around the office. She must have gotten outside, I said as I ran off. I could feel the panic welling up in my chest. The receptionist was making a call as I ran down the hallway and out to the parking lot. She was gone. I was about to call the police when I saw her sitting in the car, buckled up, ready to leave. I flung the door open. Sophia, I shouted angrily. She didn't react. Sophia, why did you leave? I demanded. She was looking pale. I didn't leave, she protested in her sweet little voice. A police car pulled up and an officer got out. Ma'am? Samantha Brown? He asked. A knot formed in my stomach. Why would he know my name? Yeah, I'm here to get my daughter looked at. I trailed off as I gestured at the car. You need to leave the premises, he continued, unfazed. But my daughter, I said, feeling the rage bubble in me. His expression made it clear he wasn't going to budge. What had Connor told them about me? Please, I just need to get my daughter looked at. She's sick, I said, pleading to a face showing no signs of pity. If you don't remove yourself from the premise, I will have to take you in, he said with an unreadable expression. It was clear I wasn't getting past him. I didn't argue. I couldn't be arrested. What would they do with Sophia? Why wouldn't he listen to me? I got in the car and slammed the door shut. The ceiling felt lower. The walls pressed in. I put my hands on the wheel and saw them shaking as a wave of anxiety crashed over me. Deep breath. Exhale. Turn the key and drive. I looked in the mirror at Sophia. She was quiet and expressionless. You can't do that, Sophia. You can't leave me like that, I said, failing to hide the tremor in my voice. We rode in silence for a moment. I'm hungry, she finally piped up. I started laughing with relief and pulled into a 7-Eleven. Okay, what do you want? I said, unbuckling her. Oreos, she chirped. We walked into the store and she squeezed my hand. I promise I won't leave you again. Mommy, we got her snacks. Oreos for her and a soda for me. I got her back in her seat and felt the cold dread as I stared at the driver's side door. I did not want to get into that metal coffin. I could feel the nausea well up in my throat. With a shaky hand, I got back into the passenger's seat, swallowing hard. Deep breath. Exhale. Turn the key. Just turn the key. Drive. We made it home. Sophia didn't really eat more than a bite of her Oreos, but that was still something. She was still looking pale. Honey, you really need to eat something, I said gently. Sophia only shrugged. Okay, we'll try a different doctor tomorrow, I said, wrapping a blanket around her. I sent a barrage of angry texts to my ex-husband, demanding to know what he told the police, the doctor. Our girl needed medical attention, and he was playing these stupid games of his. I got no response. I didn't expect one. It was much later that night that I got a knock on my door. It was a police officer handing me an envelope. What's this? I asked. Evening, ma'am. I'm here to deliver a restraining order. You're not to contact or be within 200 feet of Connor Brown, he said sternly. A what? I spluttered out. I haven't done anything. The officer handed me the envelope. Do you understand what this means, Ms. Brown? I didn't do anything. I screeched, the panic welling up in me. My daughter needs medical attention. My ex-husband is blocking me from her pediatrician. The officer just looked at me coldly. Ms. Brown, your daughter passed away 2 years ago. You were the driver. Blood alcohol was above the legal limit. He let the weight of his words settle down around me. You're not allowed within 200 feet of Mr. Brown. I could feel the walls of my house closing around me as my heart slammed into my chest. No, no, no. He was fucking with me. As Sophia is. Sophia right there. I said between panic gasps. This was a sick joke. I slammed the door and waited for the officer to leave. I don't know what Connor told him, but he must have been convincing enough for them to ignore sweet Sophia standing right behind me. I grabbed her and put her in the car. We're getting out of here, I told her. Just me and you. I forced myself into the driver's seat, fighting every instinct to just run away from the damn heap of metal. No, we need to leave. If Connor can convince them to put a restraining order on me, What else can he convince them? With shaky hands, I frantically turned the keys. Nothing. They didn't move. That's right. I picked up the little black box attached to my wheel. Deep breath. Exhale. The box beeped. Blood alcohol 0.00. Turn the key. Drive. I left my house that night. Sophia still isn't eating, and Connor has convinced every hospital to turn me away. None of them will see Sophia. They look at her and tell me to sit down, ask me to leave, ask if I have a history of mental illness. I know what the police reports say. I've read them, but they're wrong. I know what I see. My Sophia is right here. I can feel her in my arms when I hug her. I can hear her when she breathes. I can see her sweet, innocent eyes looking up at me when I hold her hand. Please, someone help me. She's cold again. I'll wrap her up warm and try another clinic tomorrow. Someone has to see her. Story 3. I don't think my neighbor is dead. I mean, they should be. I saw the body. Let me back up a bit. I moved into this basement suite in the spring. Not the best place I've ever lived. The ceiling's so low, I can press my palm flat against it without getting on my toes. Heating works when it feels like it. I've killed more spiders than I care to count, most of them crawling out of the tiny windows that are supposed to let in light, but mostly just invite things in. But it was cheap, and I needed cheap. So I took it. For a while, the upstairs was empty. Quiet. I almost started thinking I got lucky. Then the new tenant moved in. Older guy, maybe in his 60s. Gray beard, kind of wiry build, but hunched like he carried more weight than you could see. Never introduced himself. I only caught a glimpse of him once or twice, coming in or out. He kept to himself. Fine by me. I'm not exactly the neighborly type, but even when I didn't see him, I heard him. Mostly at night. He'd walk. That's all. Just walk. Back and forth, over and over. Sometimes from midnight to 4 or 5 in the morning. The pacing never really stopped until the sun started coming up. You'd think it'd get on your nerves, but it was almost rhythmic. Predictable, at least at first. Then came the scratching. At first, I figured it was mice. This is the kind of place where you'd expect mice. It had happened around 3 a.m. Little bursts of sound, sharp and frantic, like claws on drywall. And always after the pacing stopped. He'd walk, then the scratching would start, like something was following him through the walls. I tried to ignore it, until I started hearing the whispering. At first, it was so faint I thought it was coming from my phone. Just this quiet murmur above my head, too muffled to make out. I turned everything off. Still heard it. I put my ear right up to the ceiling, held my breath. That's when I heard the words. Let me back in. Over and over. The voice sounded dry, like wind blowing through old leaves. I don't know how else to explain it. The more I listened, the more wrong it felt. I stopped sleeping through the night. Coffee, podcasts, whatever. I did what I could to stay awake until daylight. It helped. A little. Then, 2 weeks ago, everything stopped. No footsteps. No scratching. No whispering. Just silence. Not peaceful silence either. The kind that makes you realize how loud nothing can be. It rang in my ears. I figured the guy had moved out, or maybe he'd passed away quietly. I thought about going upstairs, but I didn't want to get involved. I don't poke my nose where it doesn't belong. That changed a few days later when the smell started. If you've ever smelled something dead, and I mean really dead, you know what I'm talking about. It's sour, coppery, and thick. It clings to your lungs. I couldn't breathe in the hallway without gagging. That's when I finally caved. I wrapped a towel around my face and went upstairs. The door was closed, but not locked. I knocked. No answer. I opened it. It was worse than I expected. The kitchen was wrecked. The upper cabinets were ripped from the wall. Ripped, not fallen, and splintered like they'd been torn from the inside. The floor was stained with something black and sticky. Not blood. Too dark, too thick. Drag marks led from the center of the room to the far corner, and there he was. Bent backward in a way that no human body should bend. I don't mean hunched. I mean folded. His heels touched the floor, and so did his face. His spine arched up like a bridge, like something had pulled his head and feet toward each other and forced the rest to comply. His mouth was wide open like he died mid-scream, but his eyes, they were shut. Peaceful. That somehow made it worse. I backed out and called emergency services. They came fast. One of the responders took one look and had to step outside to puke. They asked me a bunch of questions, taped off the unit, and told me to stay out. I haven't slept much since. Last night, around 3 a.m., I woke up to the pacing again. Same rhythm, same sound, exactly the way it used to be. Back and forth, slow and steady, directly above me. Then came the scratching, then the whispering. But this time it wasn't muffled. It was clear, right above my head. Let me back in. I lay there frozen, staring at the ceiling. I told myself it had to be in my head. Residual stress, maybe sleep deprivation, something logical. Then came the thud. One single, solid impact, directly above my bed. Not a creak, not a drop. A thud, like something heavy slammed into the floorboards. This morning, I couldn't take it. I went upstairs. The police tape was still there, right across the door. No sign of tampering, except for one thing. Someone had left a note, stuck right onto the tape with a piece of blue painter's tape. Looked like it had been written with shaky hands. The note said, "The door is locked, but I remember the way through the walls." That was hours ago. I've kept the lights on ever since. I can't bring myself to lie down. I don't know what I'll do if I hear it again tonight. I just needed someone else to know, just in case. Story 4. There were 3 of us. Me, Nelson, and Em. We grew up in a small town in the middle of nowhere, Arkansas. The kind where nothing changes and everyone knows your name. There wasn't much to do, especially in the summer, so we got good at inventing our own fun. Exploring abandoned buildings. Playing flashlight tag. Daring each other to break into old trailers or hike deep into the woods just to prove we weren't scared. But nothing stuck with us like the game. We made it up when we were 9. Nelson had found a weird old notebook in his attic. Probably just something his older brother left behind, filled with strange little rules written in smudged pencil. Once you start the game, you must finish it. You must play in 3s. 1 will lie, 1 will forget, 1 will remember. It felt like a prank, or something made up by a bored teenager trying to freak out little kids. But we were little kids, and we wanted to be freaked out, so we played. The rules were simple, or at least they seemed simple at the time. We had to choose one abandoned place in town. That would be the anchor. Then each of us had to bring an item that meant something personal, a photo, a toy, a drawing, whatever. We placed the items in a triangle around the anchor point, and then we each sat in the middle and told a secret. After that, we weren't allowed to talk about what happened during the game. Not ever. Not even to each other. We picked the old VHS rental store on the edge of town. It had been closed for years, windows all boarded up except for one shattered pane in the back. The carpet was still stained with soda spills, and the shelves were all half empty, covered in dust. Em brought a little wooden bird her grandfather had carved her. Nelson brought a ripped picture of his family. I brought my dad's badge from the volunteer fire department. We placed them in the triangle. Sat down. Told our secrets. I don't even remember what mine was anymore. That's what's been bothering me the most lately, because I remember everything else. We went home that night like nothing happened. For a while, nothing did. We grew up, drifted in and out of each other's lives. Still stayed close, but not like before. Em got quieter. Nelson got darker. I took a night job at the jail, started living life in reverse. Then a few weeks ago, I started getting these texts from a number I didn't recognize. No words, just photos. A picture of the old VHS store. Still boarded up, but somehow different. A picture of a triangle burned into dirt. 3 items. One of them was my dad's badge. And then one that chilled me to the bone. Me. Sleeping. In my own bed. I called Nelson. He didn't pick up, but Em did. She was crying. Said Nelson had shown up at her place 2 days ago in the middle of the night. Wild-eyed, mumbling something about the game never ending. How it was waking up again. He tried to get her to pack a bag and leave town. She thought he was having some kind of breakdown. She made him tea. He left. That was the last she saw of him. I found Nelson the next day. He was sitting on the roof of the old VHS store. Barefoot. Shirtless. Shivering, even though it was 82 degrees. He didn't look at me when I climbed up. Just whispered, "You're the one who forgot, Jay. You were always the one who was supposed to forget." I asked what he was talking about. He finally turned and looked me in the eye, but it wasn't him looking back. It was panic wearing his face. "It doesn't end when the game's over," he said. "It ends when one of us stops playing." Then he stepped off the roof. He survived. Broken spine. concussion, a dozen fractures. He hasn't said a word since, and won't return my calls now. I drove by her house last night. Her car was there, lights were on, but no one answered the door. There was a triangle scratched into the wood of her porch. 3 items at each point. A wooden bird, a ripped photo, and a third object I couldn't quite make out until I got closer. My knife. From my locker at work. I didn't even know it was missing. I don't know what this is. A curse? A ritual? Just some twisted psychological experiment we stumbled into? All I know is I'm remembering more now. Little flashes. Like dreams you suddenly realize were real. In the game, I told a secret. A real one. One I haven't thought about in years. And now I keep dreaming of the VHS store. In the dark, the shelves full of blank tapes. And a figure behind the counter, wearing Nelson's face. Smiling like he knows something I don't. I think the game is choosing again. And I don't think it ends with us. Because last night, I woke up to a knock on my door. No one was there. Just a box. Inside, 3 things. A photograph of M, Nelson's broken wristwatch, and a sticky note that said, "Your turn to forget." If anyone knows what this is, how to finish a game you didn't know you were still playing, please tell me. Before I remember the secret I swore I'd never speak, and before it remembers me. Story 5. Now I know what most of you are going to be thinking. Oh, he's only posting this for engagement, but I need help. I've not long started making content for TikTok. It's been just under a year now. I thought about it for a while, and when it seemed like everyone I knew started doing it, I figured, why not me too? Coming up with an idea was a struggle. I didn't want to follow the latest trends, like my friends. The idea of doing silly dance moves or making AI brain rot was never really that appealing. But still, I wanted in. After spending what felt like hours editing it, I can still vividly remember my excitement when I posted my first video. It was me, lips syncing to my favorite song while head-banging as though I was front and center at a concert. At the time, I was thrilled with it. I'd put a load of effort into the effects, and I'd actually created something. Now, looking back at it, it makes me want to heave. It won't come as a surprise to any of you, but it never really took off. As disheartened as I was, I didn't let that stop me. But after trying everything from following the dancing trends, as much as I hated myself for it, to trying out cooking videos, nothing seemed to work. I was stuck in limbo, watching my friends around me starting to gather small followings while I sat there with a meager stack of views. Try as I might, nothing took. One night, after yet another friend managed to get thousands of views, I got to the point where I considered dropping it, just giving up. But then I started leaning into the ghost content. You know, spooky stories, urban legends, and that sort of thing. I wasn't really into them myself. It wasn't that they scare me exactly, they just made me feel a bit uncomfortable sometimes. Other times, some of them came across as downright stupid. Anyway, I tried everything, crime skits, ghost stories, even those recycled AI legends. Some stuff hit, some didn't. But eventually, I found a groove. Low-budget reenactments with my friends. They seem to get more views. Nothing major, but way more than I'd ever had before. So that's how I settled on my niche. I started narrating summaries of real-life events, murders and shootings, that kind of thing. I record the voiceover separately and put it over a video of my friends acting out whatever the story was about. It was super low budget, and again, it's probably well within the cringe category, but it worked. I'd still throw in the odd urban legend and stuff, but the summaries were where I spent most of my time. Most of them I found online, getting ChatGPT to give me a quick bullet point summary that I could turn into a script. Like I said, I'm not really into this stuff, so I didn't much care for the details. I just wanted to make videos. Anyway, I did this for a few months, and it seemed like everything was going great. I seemed to be getting more popular, and even had a few dedicated fans. I was making about 2 videos every week, just pushing out content as fast as I could. I can't remember half of them, to be honest with you, but a few stuck with me. For example, there was one about a group of students who noticed what looked like the blurry outline of a man in the background of every photo they'd ever taken together. They laughed it off as visual distortion until they looked back through their old photos, and he was there, even in childhood ones. Same stance, same trench coat. When I tried to crop him out, he appeared closer in the next picture. That one got under my skin a little, but it was a great idea for a video. I got my one friend, Jake, to dress up as the man in the background, gave him a large trench coat that I borrowed from my dad, and told him to stand as awkwardly as he could while my other friends posed for a photo. He didn't disappoint, standing as straight as he could while cocking his head at an awkward angle, looming there in the background. Wide-eyed, he slapped on the creepiest grin he could think of. He looked like an idiot, but it was unnerving. We filmed that one, and I posted it, not expecting anything out of the ordinary, but hoping that this might be the one that went viral. It did just about as well as the others, but that didn't bother me. I carried on making them. There was one about a Craigslist killer who dragged people down into his basement before killing them. That one did okay, I think because I added static and made Tom crawl up the stairs like a freak. But again, it didn't take off as much as I wanted it to. I kept this up, posting about twice a week and steadily growing. It became the new normal for me, and I could think of nothing better than getting to hang out with my friends, making stupid videos and having a laugh. Then it happened, one of them blew up. I came home one afternoon to find my phone pinging near constantly as I got notification after notification. My heart leapt into my chest as I unlocked the screen and saw they were all comments from TikTok. Looking at my view counts in TikTok Studio, they'd exploded. I could barely contain my excitement as I flicked through the overview, taking in the numbers. My older ones were getting more views too, and people were going through my entire profile. My phone pinged again as another person commented on one of them. This was the most interaction I'd ever had. It was amazing. I could barely contain myself as I clicked on it. "Love this stuff," it read. It was finally happening. I was going viral. Eagerly, I responded, thanking them and telling them I hoped they'd enjoy my new videos too. Flicking through the rest of the comments, there were more of the same, people showing their appreciation for my little passion project. But intermingled with them, there were some odd ones too. "Yo, what's that guy at 033? Hashtag Trenchman. Dude, you got a recurring character now? He's in all your vids faced with tears of joy. Is that supposed to be part of the skit? That humming, creepy AF." I had no idea what they were on about. Loads of people kept commenting on how they liked the recurring character, how they thought it was creepy. I was confused. What recurring character? I never used the same story twice. Hell, I never used the same costume twice for fear of being repetitive. And what were they talking about, humming? Bemused, I clicked on the video. It started up just as I remembered, with me and my friends running in a field, pretending to be stuck in the field where time stops. But sure enough, there was something there. In the background was what looked like Jake, dressed in that dreary trench coat. I couldn't make out his face properly. He was all the way at the other end of the field, but his head was cocked to the side, just the same. I could barely believe what I was seeing. We'd filmed that video with the trench coat a few days before that, but Jake hadn't been there at all in the field. He'd been ill when we'd filmed it. At least, that's why I assumed he'd ghosted us. Come to think of it, he still hadn't got back to me. He just left me on red. I looked back to the figure again. The likeness was uncanny. There was a sound, too, one that I don't remember putting there. It was like he was humming this tune. It was really bad. It sounded so out of tune, and there was almost no rhythm to it. Something about it set my teeth on edge, like nails running down a chalkboard. I had no idea what this was. Shaking off the chill running down my spine, I tried to be rational about it. This was just Jake messing with me. Had to be. This was his idea of a joke, standing in the background and ruining my TikToks, then adding in that stupid humming and re-uploading them somehow. Still, something seemed off about the whole thing. The comments weren't just for this video, they were on several of them, even my older ones. Flicking back through more and more of them, my blood ran cold. He was there, in every single one. Always the same, always standing there in the background, head cocked to the side and the coat draping his thin frame. He was humming that same god-awful tune. It was grating on my eardrums. There was no way. He couldn't have been pulling this prank for that long. He was even in some of them himself. He had to have been editing them, adding himself back in and re-uploading them. But how had he gotten access to my profile? Jumping back to TikTok Studio, I checked the upload times of each of them, expecting them all to show last night. They were unchanged, exactly as I'd uploaded them all of those weeks and months before. My head was swimming. How the hell had he done this? I could have sworn he was never there when we filmed them, not dressed like that at least. I'd have noticed. Deciding to nip this in the bud and call Jake out on his shenanigans, I tried to call him. My heartbeat raced as the phone connected, ringing several times until it hit voicemail. I tried again a couple more times, but it just kept ringing out. Swapping apps. I thought I'd try to catch him on Insta, but when I checked his profile, there had been no activity from him in days. He posted pretty regularly, but he'd been showing his offline for nearly a week now. What the hell was going on? All I could do was sit there, flicking back through the old TikToks. I was so confused. It was odd, although it looked kind of like Jake, something was off. He looked taller, thinner. I could make out his features, slightly more, still blurry, but defined enough for me to make out the wide eyes and creepy grin. It felt almost like the more I flicked through my videos, the closer he came to the screen. It was stupid, I know, but it was like he was making his way towards me. The more I looked at him, the more I scrolled, the more it felt like his eyes were piercing into me, his mouth unmoving as he hummed. I needed to look away to get this all out of my head until I could speak to Jake. I started scrolling aimlessly through my FYP, trying to take my mind off of it. I made it no less than 2 videos before I nearly dropped my phone. He was there, still getting closer, and he definitely wasn't Jake. A chill ran down my spine as I took in the gaunt face staring at me through the screen. I could make out the stretched features clearly now, his skin taut across his face. Other than the trench coat and the way that he was leaning, he looked nothing like my friend. He was standing there, motionless, the scenes behind him acting out, oblivious as he blocked them from view. The more I scrolled, the closer he got, to the point where it felt like his face was inches away from the screen, almost pressing against it. And the sound, that god-awful sound. The humming was so loud now, it drowned out any other sound in the videos. I could feel the speakers in my phone vibrating in my hand. Frantically locking my phone, I hurled it away, throwing it across the room toward my bed. What the hell was happening? I needed to relax, to take my mind off of this. I was obviously having some kind of breakdown. Staggering into the living room, I flopped down on the sofa. Turning on my TV, I was ready to watch some mundane shows. They didn't need to be anything in particular, I just needed a distraction. I turned to adjust the cushion next to me, trying to get as comfortable as I could, when I heard it. That grating, toneless humming. Screaming, I fumbled with the remote. It took me 3 tries to press the power button, but when I felt it under my thumb, I pushed it down as hard as I could. I caught a glimpse of that face, the eyes staring dead at me as the screen faded to black. I hurled the remote across the room, hearing it shatter on the floor as the batteries fell out from the impact. This wasn't real. There was no way this could be real. I was seeing things. Something was happening to me, but there was no way he'd been there too. Not on the TV. That was impossible. I decided to avoid screens for the next few hours, getting something to eat and deciding to read a book instead. I'd powered through around 5 chapters, and the light in the room had started growing dim. The sun was setting outside, sending purple and orange hues cascading over the laminate flooring. Tiredness had started to set in, as well as what I expect was an adrenaline crash from earlier. Getting to my feet, I shuffled towards the window, ready to close the curtains and call a night. I just wanted to forget about what had happened this afternoon. As I reached out to draw the nearest ones, I stopped dead in my tracks. Stumbling backwards, I nearly fell as I screamed. He was there just outside. His face was pressed right up against the thin layer of glass, squashed against it like he was trying to push himself through it, distorting his already gnarled features. That thin pane was all that separated us. Although slightly distorted, the same tuneless humming clawed at my eardrums. My mind froze as I scrambled frantically, trying to get back, to get away. All the while, the humming seemed to get louder and louder in my head, drowning out the sounds of my thumping feet and pounding heart. It seemed to grow, ripping its way through my mind like a mosquito whining inside your skull. All the while, I was fixed on those eyes. They seemed to bore into me, the pupils locked onto mine. They wormed their way through me, digging deeper. I felt a crawling under my skin growing more and more intense with each passing second. Finally snapping back to my senses, I ran screaming into my bedroom and slammed the door. Dragging my chair behind it to hold it closed, I ran to the far corner. Shaking, I hid there, my heart pounding. This couldn't be real. I was going mad. There was no way he could be outside my window. It was a second-floor apartment. It wasn't possible. A soft pinging from a few feet away startled me, breaking through the panic bubbling in my mind as my phone screen lit up. Shakily inching over to where I'd tossed it, I fumbled with it, dreading what I would see when I unlocked it. To my relief, the usual screen met my eyes. I'd been half expecting to see the man's face again, but there was no sign of him. There were notifications, though, so many notifications. Comments, all of them, from TikTok. With a shaking finger, I clicked on the first one, my hair standing on end as that humming sound seemed to fill the air again. I tried my hardest to ignore it as I read through notification after notification, all saying the same thing, all about that man. He's NY video now, the hell? This isn't funny anymore. I can't get him off my FYP. How do you turn this off? He's in the way. I muted my phone and he's still humming. WTF? I tried blocking you, but he's still showing up. I think he's in my mirror. The humming was so loud now, it was almost deafening. I could barely hear myself think. The skin on my scalp tightened as I fought back tears. Scanning the room again, I half expected to see the man standing behind me, his eyes boring into me as he grinned. There was nothing. The room was just as it had always been, other than the chair now propped under the door. Turning back to my phone, there were more comments, thousands of them. My blood ran cold as I realized they must be seeing the same thing as me. A soft knocking, gentle and calm, filled the air, snapping my attention back to my room. I whirled around as a new wave of terror washed over me. I was alone in the house. My parents were out and wouldn't be back for another few hours. But the knocking came again, that soft rapping at my bedroom door. Without even realizing I was doing it in the first place, I stopped humming. I don't know why or how, but he's just outside. It's got to be him. I can't go back out there. I don't know what to do. What does he want? He's knocking at the door again now, in time with that god-awful tune. What if he's still here when my parents get home? The humming keeps getting louder. I can't get out of my head. Oh God, please help. The views keep going up. Story 6. The wind made a low sound in the winter-stiff grass of the cemetery. My mother, sister, and brother stood in the cold beside the new earth, and I stood with them. We did not look at each other. We looked at the hole. My father, who had been the warrant for our lives, was in that hole, and we were what was left. For shapeless things set to motion by some old and forgotten custom, because the man who gave us shape was in the ground, and whatever part of us that knew the right way to stand or breathe was down there with him. The ride from that place was quiet. My mother, Eleanor, sat beside me, and her hand were knotted one on top of the other in her lap. In the back, my sister, Clara, had listed against my brother's shoulder, Thomas. He stared out at the passing dark with the stone face of a boy playing at manhood, and I could feel his gaze on the back of my neck from time to time. We arrived home. The air was choked with the baked meats and pale casseroles of the neighbors, a sick kind of charity that no one would touch. A woman from next door was speaking. Mrs. Gable, Eleanor, you must eat something. You will need your strength. My mother smiled. Thank you, Carol. You are too kind. I could not stand the sound of their whispers, nor the weight of their pity. They looked at us like we were relics of a sudden and common tragedy. I would not be one of them. I had to leave. Mother, I said, I'm going to take a drive, just to clear my head. She turned her dark eyes on me. They were old eyes. Leo, perhaps it is best you stay. The hour is late. I won't be long, I said. I just need some air. Clara looked up. Well, don't go too far, Leo. I put my hand to Thomas's shoulder as I passed. I woke the engine and pulled the car from the curb and left behind the house with its false piety and its wilting flowers. I had no destination. I just drove. I pushed the car out onto the blacktop, and the tires screamed on the turns. The houses fell away to fields, and then the fields gave themselves over to the woods, a dense and unbroken wall that ran along the old state road. Here I thought I would find a silence I could stand. For some miles I did. Only the engine and the wind that tore through the open window. The sun was going down in the west, and it bled across the sky in violent hues of orange and deep purple. Its beauty was an offense and a blasphemy. The world had no right to such colors when my father could not see them. I pushed my foot to the floor, and then the engine choked. It coughed once and then again. The steady hum of the motor tore itself into a rattling gasp. The car shuddered and bucked, and I wrestled the wheel and guided its dying weight to the gravel shoulder just as the engine quit altogether. I tried the crank. It gave a lone dry click, and then nothing. I sat there for a long time with my hands gripping the wheel. The colors bled out of the sky and left it a bruised and draining gray. I was stranded on a road that went nowhere, flanked by a black and serrated wall of trees, miles from a town that was awash in my own sorrow. The last of the sun died behind the tree lean, and the dark seeped into everything. And it was in that quiet that the sound came, drifting from the absolute black of the woods. It was low and it was lonesome, and it was the slow, aching voice of some stringed instrument. I believed it to be a cello, though I could not say for certain. I sat in the car and listened to it and knew nothing else. For a long space of time, one part of my mind spoke reason. I would have to be a fool to walk into the woods at dusk on an empty road. Thomas would have called me so. My mother would be made sick with the worry of it. And yet, I would have to be a fool to also sit in a dead car. The road was empty of other travelers. There were no houses here. There was only me, and there was the sound. I reasoned that it was a man, and that a man might help me, and I pushed open the door of the car. The music was made clearer. It was a tune of impossible sadness. It called to me. The trees were old, and thick black pines stood like skeletons against a sky draining of its light. "Hello," I said. The cello did not stop playing. It only beckoned me onward into the coming dark. I do not know how long I walked on that soft bed of pinefall, but I broke through the trees and into a clearing, and I stopped. The thing I saw was wrong, and it was right all at once. In the center of that small glade on the trunk of a felled tree sat a man. He held a cello before him, and its wood shone with a deep and secret light, and he drew the bow across its belly with his head bowed to the work. He was still save for the measured slide and return of his arms. The clothes he wore were dark and finely cut, and they had no place in such a setting. His hair was the color of a crow's wing, and his face was a bloodless pale. He played out the last of the phrase, and the final note hung in the air like a soul loath to leave its body, and then it was gone, and there was only the low hum of the forest night. He looked up then, and his eyes found me in the gloaming. They were dark, and they were deep, and there was a great stillness in them, as if my coming there was a thing he had been waiting on for some long time. "Lost, little bird," he said. I cleared my throat of a sudden thickness. "My car," I said, and gestured with my hand back toward the road I had left. It broke down on the service road. I heard your music." "Ah," he said. A smile touched the corner of his mouth. "It does tend to carry on the evening air. Forgive my lack of a formal concert hall." He set the bow to rest across the strings. "It is a dangerous thing to wander into these woods after dark. I was hoping you might have some way to get a message to town," I said, "or know of a nearby house with a telephone." The man stood, and I saw that he was tall and slender, and he moved with a litheness that was not entirely natural. "There are no houses for miles," he said, and his tone was soft, and I thought I heard pity in it. "And my means of communication are rather more esoteric. My name is Julian." "Leo," I replied. He took a step from a log, and I took a step back from him. There was a warning in the deep part of me. He saw this, and he stopped, and the smile did not leave his face. "You are burdened, Leo," he said, and his dark eyes looked not at me, but into me as if he could see the hollow ruin in my chest. "I saw it on you the moment you stepped into my glade. You carry a heavy weight, a loss." The truth of his words struck me dumb, as if he had reached into my skull and pulled the thought from me. "My father," I whispered. "We just buried him this afternoon." "I am truly sorry," Julian said, and the words sounded true in a way that nothing else had. "There is no pain like it. The world keeps turning, foolishly, maddeningly, and you are left with an amputation in your soul." He took another slow step toward me, and this time I did not move. "What if I told you there was a way to soothe that pain, to quiet that part of you which knows only how to grieve?" I blinked at him. "What are you talking about? Nothing can do that but time." "Ah, but time is a crude, clumsy surgeon," he said. He stood now no more than an arm's length from me, and I could feel a coldness coming off him. It dulls the wound by piling scar upon scar, burying the fresh ache under a heap of smaller ones. but it never truly heals it. The pain remains. He tilted his head like a curious hawk. I offer something more profound, a release, a gift that rewrites the very nature of suffering. It does not erase the memory, but it cauterizes the wound forever. The hurt will become a thing you observe, like a painting from your past, but no longer a blade twisting in your gut. His words were a dark gospel sung to the raw and weeping wound inside of me. That part of me that clawed for release was now stronger than the part that counseled fear. I only wanted the pain to be over. "Ow?" I asked. Julian's smile widened, and I saw his teeth in the twilight. They were very white. "It is simple," he whispered, and his hand rose and came to rest upon my shoulder. The cold of it was a shock. His touch was absolute, and I knew I could not move from that spot if I tried. His other hand rose and cupped my jaw, and he tilted my head to the side. "This will only sting for a moment," he said. "Then the healing begins." Before my mind could make sense of his meaning, he leaned his head to my neck. I felt a sharp and piercing pain, a pain of 2 points like hot needles driven into my flesh. A gasp was torn from my throat, but no cry would follow it. A great and sudden weakness flooded the vessel of my body, and the world upended itself. The dark trees smeared into streaks of black, and the last of my grief and my fear dissolved into a rushing dark. The last thing I saw was the darkness of his eyes as he looked down upon me, and in them I did not see malice. I saw what I took to be a terrible and profound pity. I woke to the steering wheel pressed into my chest. A gray and cheerless light seeped through the glass of the car windows. It was dawn, and the memory of it came back to me. A pale face, the touch of a cold hand, a pain like 2 spikes driven into the flesh of my neck. I sat upright with a winded gasp, and my own hand flew to my neck. My fingers found 2 small hard knots on the skin, like the bites of some strange insect, but I knew in my soul they were not. I was in my car where I had been. The door was shut. There was no sign of the man Julian, and there were no tracks in the dirt but my own leading to the dark wall of the woods. I did not know if it had been a dream or not. My body felt, strange to me now, the hollow ache of grief had been muted. I knew the fact of my father's death, but I did not feel the weight of it. And in place of that weight, there was a high and terrible alertness. On pure instinct, I reached for the crank and gave it a turn. The engine caught and tore itself into a living sound, a sound of greater power than I had ever known it to possess. I put the car in gear, and I fled that cursed stretch of road. The familiar streets of my town were different. The clatter of a milk wagon down a side street was like a gunshot right next to my ear. The smell of coal, smoke from a chimney a block away was like a black powder in my lungs. The world came at me, an assault on the senses. It was too much. I pulled the car to the curb before the house, and I killed the engine. I stilled myself for what was to come. I saw the curtain in the window twitch, and then the door was thrown open and my mother was on the porch. The black funeral dress was still on her. She had not slept. "Leo. Oh, thank God, Leo." She came down the steps in a rush, and her arms were around me as I stepped from the car. "Where were you?" We were beside ourselves. "Thomas was just about to go looking for you with Mr. Gable." I held her, and through the thin black cloth of her dress, I could feel the frantic beat of her heart. I could smell the life on her, the heat of her blood in the veins and the salt of her skin, and some new and ravenous thing woke in the pit of me. I pulled back from her, as if from a fire. "I'm sorry, Mother," I said. The car, it stalled on the old service road. I must have been more tired than I thought. I fell asleep, waiting for someone to come by. She put her hand to my face, and its warmth was a brand on my cold skin. "You're pale as a sheet, and you feel so cold. You come inside this instant. I'll get some coffee on, and there's leftover ham." The thought of coffee made me sick, and the image of the ham, of its pink and lifeless flesh, sent a gorge rising so powerfully that I had to clench my teeth to hold it down. "No, Mother, please. I need to lie down." The exhaustion just caught up to me, I think. Inside, my sister Clara was at the foot of the stairs, and the worry on her face gave way to relief. And Thomas stood in the doorway to the sitting room. His arms were crossed over his chest, and his eyes were hard, and they questioned me. "Where'd you go?" he asked. "The car broke down," I said again. and I pushed past him toward the stairs. I'm fine, but I was not fine. The house was full of their life, of their heat and their breath. I went to my room, and I closed the door on the sound of them. I leaned my back against the wood, and a hunger I did not know clawed at my gut. It was not a hunger for any food I had ever eaten. I stumbled to the small mirror over the wash basin. The face that looked back at me from the silvered glass was my own, and it was not. The skin was tight across the bone, and it held the waxy pallor of a corpse. But it was my eyes that held me. They were still blue, but there was a new darkness swimming in them, a depth that had not been there before. And the pupils were blown wide like an animal's. And as I stared, the man in the mirror parted his lips, and my tongue, of its own volition, went to my canine teeth, and found that they were longer, that they were sharpened to a point. A great dizziness washed over me, the memory of the man Julian. It does not erase the memory, but it cauterizes the wound forever, and the grief was far and distant. But in its place he had put this thing, this cold alertness, this revulsion for food, this awful and unholy hunger. He had given me his gift, and I ran my trembling fingers over the two perfect punctures that lay hidden beneath the collar of my shirt, and I knew. The cost of curing the soul's grief was the soul itself. I was no longer Leo, a son and a brother. I was something else entirely. The days that followed were a new kind of hell. I stayed locked inside of my bedroom with my curtains drawn tight against the sun that held a searing malevolence. The pale light that trespassed through the gaps itched and burned my skin. My family, in their grace and their ignorance, respected what they took to be my exhaustion. They left trays of cooked meats and bread outside my door, and the food went untouched until my mother would retrieve them hours later with a small sigh. And the hunger grew. My own stomach was a place of disgust for the food in my mother's house. When Clara would knock and her clear voice would pass through the door, it was a torment. When I heard the sound of my brother Thomas in the hall, the sound of his hot thrumming life was a tremor of want that went through my whole body. I stayed in that room not for myself, but for them. For what I had become viewed my family not with the love I knew, but with a cold and terrible calculus. "Leo, please," my mother said through the door on the third night. "Let me in. Talk to me. Dr. Haynes said he can make a house call. Are you ill? Whatever it is, son, we can face it together." "I'm fine, Mother," I called out to her. I was coiled on the bed, my fists clenched to whiteness. The drum of her heart through the thick oak of the door was a lure I could not long deny. "I just need rest. I will be down in the morning." But on the fourth night, the hunger was a tyrant, and my body screamed for what it now needed. I knew if I stayed within those walls, I would lose what little purchase I had and commit a horror that could never be undone. When the last of the light had gone, a fever came upon me, and all reason was ash. I had to be out of that house. I had to feed. I slipped from my room, and I passed through the dark house, and it made no sound to mark my going. The floors that had grown my whole life beneath my weight were now silent under my feet. I passed down the stairs like a draft of cold air. I unlatched the front door, and I went out into the night. The moon was a high cold eye in the darkness, and it bathed the world in a silver light that was more true to me now than the sun had ever been. I did not go to the woods. The nature of the thing, I knew that the herd was in the town. I stalked the edges of it, and I kept to the black shadows of the alleys and the stone walls of gardens. And every sense was a fire in me, alive to the night and what it might offer. And then I heard him, the unsteady scuff of his boot heels and a slurred and tuneless song. A man who had come from the side door of Connolly's Tavern, too deep in his cups to navigate the main road. He was a tramp I knew by sight. He stank of cheap whiskey and sour sweat, and beneath it all was the rich copper scent of his blood, and it was a call to the deepest part of me. I took him in the narrows of the alley behind the butcher's shop. He was fumbling in his trousers with the slack-jawed confusion of the drunkard. He saw me step from the ink-black shadows, and he squinted his eyes. "Hey, what you want, boy?" he slurred. I gave him no answer. There were no words for this. I crossed the space between us in less than a second. One hand clamped to his mouth to quell his cry, and the other pulled his head to the side, and the vein there pulsed against the night. The world went red. There was the brief terror in his eyes and the panicked thrash of his limbs, and then a gurgling sound as the hot iron taste of his blood flooded my mouth. and it was a benediction and a damnation in a single instant. The relief was ecstasy, an explosive charge that silenced the agony I had carried for days. The flavor was life itself, rich and deep and true. It stilled the beast in me. When the fever passed, I fell back from him. The man slumped to the stones. His eyes were wide, and they saw nothing. A small dark trickle of his blood had run down his chin, and his neck was a ruin. The cobblestones were slick and black with him. I looked at my own hands, at the front of my shirt. A great wave of revulsion crashed over the calm of the predator. And the boy named Leo was there again, staring at the work he had done. I had killed a man. I fled into the dark, trembling with a foul mix of satiation and a loathing for myself that had no bottom. I found a horse trough blocks away, and I washed myself in the cold, clear water. When I slipped back into the sleeping house, the silence was no longer a refuge. It was an indictment. I was the wolf in the fold, a monster cloaked in the skin of their son and brother, the new and terrible keeper of Julian's awful and bloody gift. I insist. My mother said the words in the hall. I had crept from my room for a glass of water, and she stood there waiting for me. The light from the downstairs lamps was a hostile glare that made me squint my eyes. "We will all have dinner together tonight," she said, and her arms were crossed over her chest. At the table, as a family, the Gables sent over a fine roast, and Clara baked a loaf of bread. "There will be no more of this hiding in your room, Leo. Your father would not have wanted this." I could not argue. "Yes, mother. Of course." Her face changed. The hard lines of her resolve softened. "Good," she said. 6 o'clock. Thomas will be home from his part-time stocking work then. It'll be nice. We will get back to normal. Normal. The word was from a language I no longer spoke. At some minutes to 6, I came down the stairs, and the smells that rose from the dining room were horrible. The rich scent of roasted meat, the smell I had once coveted, was now the perfume of cooked death. The yeast and wheat of my sister's bread was like the smell of dry dust. They were all there when I entered. Clara gave me a small and hopeful smile. Thomas looked at me, and his usual suspicion was held in abeyance by his mother's will. My mother sat at the head of the table, near the steaming dishes, and her face was lit with the brittle triumph of a woman who had wrested one small victory. "Leo, come, sit," she said, and gestured to my seat across the table from Clara. "I will serve you a plate." "Thank you, mother, but I can serve myself," I said. I placed onto my plate a slice of beef, so thin it was translucent. I took a single boiled potato, a sprig of green parsley. I sat. The life that came from them, the heat of their bodies, and the rhythm of their breathing, and the low thump of their hearts beating just beneath the skin, all of it was an agony to me. The hunger that had been sated but 2 nights before stirred in the pit of me, a sleeping wolf roused by the proximity of the flock. "It feels so good to be all together," Mother said, and she began to speak of the weather and of the goings-on at the parish. Clara spoke of a book. Thomas said nothing. He only watched me from over the rim of his glass of milk. I took up my fork. I nudged the potato. Forcefully, I lifted it to my mouth. The moment its mealy substance touched my tongue, my body rose in revolt. My throat closed like a noose, and a hot bile climbed my gullet. I forced it down with a swallow of water. "Clara, this bread is simply wonderful," Mother said. "Leo, you must try a piece." The basket was past my hands. I took a piece, and I tore a small corner from it and put it in my mouth. All I could think of was the man in the alley. All I could remember was the glorious and terrible torrent of his life. "Is something wrong, Leo?" Clara asked. "You look as though you've eaten a lemon." I pulled my lips back from my teeth in a thing that was meant to be a smile. "No, not at all. It's delicious. I think perhaps my stomach has shrunk from not eating properly these past few days." Thomas set his fork down, and the sound of the silver on the china was a sharp report that silenced the table. He was looking at me. "You haven't swallowed a single bite, Leo," he said. "I've been watching you. You just move it around the plate." "Thomas, that is enough," Mother said. "No, it's not," he said, and his eyes never left my own. "Something's wrong with you. You're always cold. You never go out during the day. Your eyes look strange, and you haven't eaten a real meal since the day of Father's funeral." Don't lie and say you have. We can all see you haven't. A great silence fell over the room. The ticking of the clock in the hall was the only sound. My mother stared at my brother as if he were a stranger to her, and Clara's gaze went between us, and her bottom lip began to tremble. All of them looked at me. A low pressure built behind my canines. My hands below the table had taken a napkin and were twisting it into a knot. I had to leave. Now, I don't feel well, I said. I pushed my chair back from the table, and its legs shrieked against the polished wood of the floor. Thomas is right. I'm not hungry. Forgive me. I did not wait for their reply. I turned and fled from the light of the room and from their living faces. I took the stairs two at a time. I shut the door to my room, and I locked it, and I collapsed against the cool wood of it. My body trembled with the thing it held inside me. And from downstairs I could hear the sound of their voices, muffled and urgent. My mother's reprimand. My brother's hot defense. My sister beginning to cry. The lie was cracking. A week passed in that house, and it was a week of coldness. I became a ghost in my own house, a creature of the upper floors in the deepest hours of the night when I might slip down for a glass of water from the tap. My brother's suspicion was a wall between us now, and my mother's love was fear. The hunger in me had been fed, but it was a patient beast. It was coiled and it was waiting. And a thing stronger than the hunger rose in me now, a need that drove me from the house. A need for answers. What was I? And what were the laws of this new and cursed earth I walked upon? There was only one who knew. That night, when the house had fallen into a sleep that was not restful, I went out from it. The car answered the crank. It did not fail me now. I drove the miles of dark road back to the place where everything had changed. I parked the car on the patch of earth where the man I was had died. I went to the wall of the woods. The path to the glade was not a memory in my mind, but now a new instinct in my blood. Julian, I called to the darkness. I know you are here. Show yourself. There was no sound. I stepped into the trees. The branches that reached for me, I broke with a strength I had not owned before. There is no point in hiding. You did this to me. The least you can do is explain. Such impatience, a voice said. It came from directly behind me. I turned, and he was there. Julian, leaning against the great trunk of an oak. Patience is a virtue of eternity, Leo. You must learn it. I did not have the time for his philosophy. What did you do to me? I said, what am I? He pushed himself from the tree and walked toward me through the gloom. Is it not obvious? He said. I gave you the gift I promised. I have made you like me. Immortal, strong, keen of sense. You are untethered from the sluggish, inevitable decay of your kind. We are predators at the apex of the world, beings of the night. He paused. Or rather, you're a confused fledgling who blundered through his first feed like a clumsy animal. I heard of your work in town. Very enthusiastic. A cold shame washed through me. He was a person, I said. He was sustenance, Julian corrected. Cattle have names too, I'm sure. You mustn't get attached. Sentimentality is the anchor that drowns our kind. It roots you in a world you are no longer a part of. My family, I cannot eat. The smell of their food makes me sick. And when I'm near them, I feel the hunger, he said, and he nodded as a scholar does at a simple axiom. Yes, their beating hearts. The sound is louder to a newborn like yourself. It takes a discipline you do not yet possess to live beside them without seeing a meal. It is a skill, I confess, that I myself have found little use for. But this is not a life, I said. I'm a prisoner in my own home. The sun, the amusement left his face. Ah, yes, the great tyrant's son, he said. That is the one true law. The price for what we are. You are right to hide from it. Direct sunlight is death, Leo. A swift and ravenous death. Avoid it as you would the very eye of God. So that's it. I'm condemned to the shadows forever, to hide from them and starve for blood, Julian said. Say the word. You must accept what you are. That is the only path. You crave the essence of life. Red blood, human blood. Your life is measured now from hunt to hunt. He stepped closer, and the unnatural cold of him washed over me. I chose you, Leo, for the great darkness I saw in your grief. I thought to grant you a life where such pain had no purchase. You did not cure my pain, You made it eternal. I said to him, I will lose them all, my mother, my sister, my brother, and I will still be here when they are dust. Your gift is a curse. A strange and knowing sadness touched his lips. Perhaps, he said, or perhaps you have not lived long enough in its shadow. A century from now, when their faces are but a painless echo, you will see the mercy I have given you. His words were the words of a madman. Now go home, fledgling. Learn control. Your family is your first and greatest trial. Lie beside them, and we shall see if you are a shepherd or only a wolf. The choice, as they say, is yours. He turned then, and he did not walk into the woods, but was consumed by them, the deep shadows pulling him back into themselves until he was gone. I stood alone in the moonlight. I was chilled not by the air of the night, but by the terrible and lucid knowledge of what I had become. He had given me the laws of my new life and a challenge to control the beast, or be devoured by it from within. And so I went out into the night to do the work that must be done. I took to the lonely roads between our town and the next. The drunks and the tramps of my own streets I left to their miserable sleep. Their disappearances were too close to home. Instead, my hunts were for men who traveled alone, for farmhands returning late from a distant field. Julian's cold catechism was my guide. I learned to be a clean and silent predator. The bodies I gave to the deep woods, and the earth took them without comment. But my brother was not a man for illusions. He had our father's eyes and our father's unwillingness to abide a lie. The sickness I had claimed as my shield had grown thin with the passing weeks. He watched me, and he knew the man I had been, and he saw the wrongness of the thing I had become. He chose his time. One night, when I was coming from my room to go out upon my hunt, to take a drive, I called it. Mother and Clara were abed. He was waiting at the foot of the stairs, a shadow standing in the greater shadow of the hall with his arms crossed over his chest. He barred my way. Out for another drive, Leo, he said. Yeah, the night air helps clear my head, I said, and I made a step around him. He did not move. His eyes, so like our father's eyes, held mine. I do not believe you, he said. Mother chooses to believe, and Clara is too afraid not to. But I do not. I have been watching you. Since that night. Nothing has changed, I said. Everything has, he said, and he took a step toward me. The living heat of him rolled off his body in waves, and the coiled thing in me stirred. You are stronger. I saw you move that heavy crate of Father's old books in the attic last week like it was nothing. I remember it took both of us to get up there. And you're colder. Mother touched your arm this morning, and she said it was like touching marble. His voice went lower. What happened on that road, Leo? What was done to you? I try to keep my voice flat. You are letting your imagination get the best of you. I'm only grieving. This is not grief, he said, and he shook his head slowly. Grief makes you weak. It makes you cry. It makes you need people. You are the opposite of that. You avoid the daylight. Where do you go every night? Tell me the truth, Leo. There is nothing to tell, I said. I'm handling my grief in my own way. And I would appreciate it if you would stop keeping watch on me like I am a criminal and let me live in peace. He stood there. You are not him, he whispered. His eyes fell from mine. I do not know who you are, but you are not my brother. And with that, he unbarred the way. He stepped to the side. The small war he had been waging was over, and he had lost. I passed by, and I opened the door to the night. I could feel his eyes on my back, the eyes of a stranger. I knew as I went out from the house that the last door to the man I had been was now closed and barred forever. The quiet dread my brother had harbored began to seep from the walls of our house and bleed into the very soil of the town. The disappearances of lone men, scattered by miles and weeks, began to spread to the public. At first, it was whispers over fence posts, then a low murmur in the general store. Then, the matter was made ink and given a name in the Creek Valley Ledger. Another traveler vanishes on County Line Road, my mother read aloud one evening. Clara's hands were frozen over the bright colors of her embroidery. Thomas stared into the fireplace. I stood half swallowed by the shadow of a velvet curtain. Authorities issue warning, Mother went on. Travel after dark on the less frequented roads is ill-advised until this rash of unexplained incidents has been resolved. They suspect wild animals. A bear, perhaps, or a cougar. In the charged stillness that followed her words, I felt the shift. 3 sets of eyes, a silent and unified inquiry, turned to me, the family's nocturnal traveler. The animal they spoke of stood among them, cloaked in the skin of their son, their brother. In that moment, a terrible clarity descended upon me. My presence in that house was no longer a comfort, but a slow and creeping contagion. My deceptions, my spectral comings and goings, my very unnatural being had not just cut the fabric of our family. The predator I contained was now casting a long and bloody shadow upon the world they inhabited. To protect what remained of them from the rot I carried within me, I had to excise myself from their lives. It was the final and only act of love the monster I had become was capable of. That evening, I did not retreat to my room. I remained among them, a silent witness to a life I was already outside of. I watched my mother in her chair, her nimble fingers mending a pair of Thomas's socks. I watched Clara at the desk, the glint of lamplight on the pale gold of her hair as her lips moved silently, forming the words she composed in a letter to our aunt. And I watched Thomas, who sharpened a small pocket knife with a whetstone. He never looked at me, but I knew he felt my gaze. I committed every day. That's it for today's creepy Reddit tales. Before we go, I just want to say a quick thanks to all of you for watching, liking, and sticking around. You guys keep this channel going, and I'll be back soon with more stories that'll make your skin crawl. Drop a comment if you've got your own spooky tale to share, and I'll see you in the next one.